So I am joined once again by my good friend Richard Garcia, and also I just found out after this whole interview that he's actually consuming Chick-fil-A. So not that's how far conservative this guy is. I mean, total right-wing nut job. Uh, so with that being said, let's walk right into immigration. Yeah, see what I did there? Walk right into immigration. So what as a you said earlier that you're a sixth generation American citizen. What exactly, I mean, do you believe that because of your genetics and your heritage that you have a better feeling of the whole situation, so therefore you are more anointed than some others? What are your thoughts?
No, I wouldn't think that my opinion is it was more valid based off of my race. I would say that being where I lived, I can speak more. I can have more of a better perspective as to how illegal immigration impacts inner city communities, predominantly Hispanic communities, disproportionately to other communities. So that's how I think it would factor in. Is just a real life perspective. So I grew up in a historical Black and Hispanic community, and what I saw was that illegal immigration disproportionately affected these communities than rural or most predominantly Anglo communities. Because when you have illegal immigration, the vast majority of the people that are coming here illegally are not settling in these higher cost of living areas. They tend to be settling in inner city communities, which are disproportionately Hispanic and Black. And now, of course, not all people who immigrate here illegally are prone to commit crime more than others, but you tend to see that, or I don't know, I'll correct myself. It's not everybody who comes here illegally is a criminal, but the vast majority of people who come here illegally, they have a higher chance of committing crime, and that crime is affecting inner city communities disproportionately because that's where they're moving to.
Mhm.
Secondly, because they're not, most of them who come here illegally cannot afford to live in those. They're living in these communities. They're also taking more of the jobs away um, from from people who otherwise could fill the job. I'll give you an example. There's one person who's considered like the patron of the Hispanic community, and that's Cesar Chavez.
Uh-huh.
Well, most people don't know that Cesar Chavez was adamantly opposed to illegal immigration. This is something that history has tried to cover up. Um, the Democratic Party has really done a number to try to hide that fact. The reason that Cesar Chavez opposed to legal immigration was because he understood basic economics, right? If you have 100 people coming into, like if you have thousands of people flooding into the country, they're going to drive down the cost of labor because there's more people competing for less jobs. So then an employer naturally is going to drive down the labor. And what I've seen happen is that jobs that Americans used to fill, they're just getting priced out of it. They can't even compete for these jobs anymore, and they won't
Right.
even consider it. Like mostly in construction.
Hmm.
So, but those jobs are disproportionately affecting Hispanics who are born in America or African Americans who disproportionately are living in poverty who are competing for those jobs. So they're getting priced out of jobs, and that's why I'm against illegal immigration.
Okay. Were you always against illegal immigration?
Yes, I was always against illegal immigration. So I never said, well, one, I've never supported illegal immigration because it is illegal. So I just don't support.
Well, how about the idea of building a wall? Would you ever, was there ever a point where you didn't like that or?
So yeah, in the past I debated it when I was a Democrat, but of course now I'm a Republican. I've debated it not because I didn't think it was like bad ideology, but I was just concerned about the cost and the effectiveness of it. That was my only concern was would it be, and what I've done, I've crunched the numbers and I thought well, maybe it might actually be more cost effective to have like an invisible smart wall where you'd have like series of like drones
You
and
really thought this through, didn't you?
yeah, and I even did the cost analysis and figured it was much cheaper than building a wall. That like having drones and sensors
Oh,
constantly
really?
And so I thought that could have been more effective, but generally I do support a barrier. I think either one, like whether it's a smart wall or an actual wall or a combination of the two, depending on the terrain, I know that it is going to be more cost effective to have some kind of barrier in place, whether it's a physical one or a more sensor based one with drone support, because it's going to be more cost effective, because once we stop the flood of illegal immigration, it's going to bring down the costs that we're experiencing both in our healthcare and our education system from the people who immigrate illegally.
Oh wow. Okay, that's pretty substantive. So, one thing, what I want to you've been in strategy meetings for both Democrats and Republicans, I'm sure.
Yes.
This is something that drives me crazy, and no one's ever answered it. Well,
Sure.
first is the initial question, the setup question, and that is, do you determines your merits, how good you are at something based on your race?
No, in fact, considering that is actually counterproductive. It is actually quite detrimental. So here's why. So, for example, I don't believe that race should be considered at all in admission to universities, to colleges, to law school, to anything. Because what I'm concerned about is that when you factor in that, there's a chance that once that person graduates from school, that an employer would question, well, was this person qualified? Did they went in on their own merits, or was there some other factor as to why they got in? Now, I personally would never do that, but I think sometimes trying to do things like that is detrimental to the people you're trying to help. Here's another example, and that I would explain. Okay, you shouldn't really factor in race in for university admission at all, because when you're basically giving a leg up to someone who may or may not have got into that school, once they get in, they then have to compete with people that performed, like, let's say there's a scholastic test. They're going to have to compete with people who performed better
Yeah.
on tests. And and if that test is accurate to predict the chances of success, you're going to see to where that student may be underperforming because, I mean, you understand what I'm trying to say?
Oh no, I understand. Yeah, yeah. It's sort of the question against affirmative action. Now, the follow-up question to that is, why do both parties, when they discuss strategy, divide America up by race? We need to get the black vote. We need to get the Latino vote. We need to get the young vote, the this vote, the that. Why don't they just try and get, target people based on their values? So, hey, let's, as Republicans, let's go after people we know are pro-life, or as Democrats, let's go after people we know are pro-welfare or whatever. Why don't we? Why isn't strategy discussed in that way? Why is that?
That's a good question. I'm not sure that I have a good answer for you. I think for a lot of people, it's just how do we manage the strategy, and how do we target particular audiences? And so naturally, maybe, well, let's break it up by race, let's break it up by demographics, let's break it up by income. I mean, there are a lot of other
Yeah.
factors,
Yeah.
strategy, especially when you get into marketing. But I don't know. I don't know that it's the right way to do things. I agree.
Right.
Maybe
Because
focus on people.
exactly. Because I mean, I'm sitting here. I mean, of course, I care about Latinos and blacks and Asians and women and men. All that. But I mean, I don't necessarily. I don't go out in the street and go, "Oh my goodness, it's a black guy. I gotta be friends with him." I want to know if what are your values. So I don't know. Maybe it's just me, and I'm not going to give you any of the, oh, well, I don't see race, I don't see color. I understand that can be extremely condescending. Nevertheless, why do Latinos feel the same way, that people are kind of profiling them, be it to help them or love them or to, become friends with them? Do you think that there's that sensation?
Oh, for sure. And it's actually detrimental to whomever is attempting to do it that way, because As I mentioned in one of the previous shows that we did, Hispanic people are a whole spectrum. Like we're like, I mean, just the history of it. You know, you've Hispanic people are some are predominantly indigenous, others are actually mostly European. Like there's a lot of people in Mexico, especially Mexico City, that are predominantly European, who are Mexican, and then of course because of the previous slave trade that happened in Latin America too, a lot of us Hispanics are actually more identified with African roots. So you've got the entire spectrum within the Hispanic community. So trying to tackle it as a block is not efficient nor accurate, but that's just what people do in America, at least.
That I find it unfortunate, especially considering the fact that you're educated enough to know there are no races in the human biology. It's sort of it's just a arcane, made up sort of belief, a race. But that's what we seem to base our society on nowadays, and it's heartbreaking.
It is.
In my opinion. Do you last question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel or believe, feelings I believe are kind of irrelevant for this question. Do you believe that Latinos are discriminated against? Maybe not systemically, maybe not as a majority, but do you think that there is an oppression of them that's not talked about?
Well, I wouldn't say there's a systematic oppression of Hispanic people. I wouldn't say that. Now, are Hispanic people being discriminated against? I would say there, of course, is some isolated examples of discrimination. I think white people are discriminated against. I think black people. I think there are people who are discriminated from the entire spectrum: white, black, Hispanic. But what I would say is that it's not as prevalent as it used to be, and it is a disservice to try to paint the picture or create the narrative otherwise. Discrimination should and must be fought everywhere it is seen, but we have to recognize that we're not seeing even a small portion of what it was in like the 1950s or 1960s. Like the people in my family line, like, have told me stories of horrendous discrimination. But that's predominantly in the past. I haven't seen any examples of it today. But if it is, we should fight it. But I don't think it's as bad as what people try to paint pictures coming from the left.
Last question, and this is the heavy hitting one. Why should anybody support Trump in 2020?
Oh, definitely. I think all Americans. I think all Americans, if you truly love America and you want to do what's best for the American people, then support President Trump. What I said is look past the rhetoric. Look past the rhetoric, whether it's coming from the left or the right. Look at the results. What President Trump has done, even through all the obstruction that he has received from the left and from the right for the past few years. From both sides, he has managed to accomplish so much. And imagine what more he's going to do if we give him 4 more years. He has really turned the economy around. Under the Obama administration, the economy was stagnant. It was sputtering for the entire 8 years. When President Trump came into office, he cut through the red tape. He got rid of all the excessive regulations that were holding back jobs, and he really put the economy on fire. And so we got to continue that momentum that this president has accomplished.
Well, thank you very much, Richard Garcia, for your extraordinarily valuable time. I really hope I get to talk to you more. Thank you so much for coming on.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you, Alex.
You bet.